Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our fifth in a series of webinars that we are providing for the Niska Nation with respect to federal, provincial, and Niska Nation supports for Niska citizens during this unprecedented time of COVID-19. Our fifth webinar today will provide an overview of supports for businesses, particularly in relation to the Niska Nation, small businesses that may be eligible for programs, supports for their respective small businesses during COVID-19. Our panel this afternoon consists of Mr. Ryan Hales of MNP and Mindy White, also of MNP. The Niska Nation, through Nisga'a government, has partnered with MNP to provide information to the Niska Nation with respect to COVID-19 supports. And joining us from Nisga'a government, we have Bert Mercer, who is the Economic Development Manager for Nisga'a government. And from the Nisga'a Museum, we have Teresa Schober. And from the Niska village of Lac-Alzap, we have Mr. Andrew Robinson. So just an overview of our agenda for this 1-hour webinar. We will begin with our usual updates from MNP with respect to updates with on federal and provincial programs in relation to supports for small businesses. And that will be provided by Ryan Hales and Mindy White. And then we will go into Niska Nation programs and services in relation to supports for entrepreneurs and businesses provided by Bert Mercer. And then our Niska Museum Director Curator, Teresa Schober, will provide us an overview of the Niska Museum's restart plan and how the summer is looking for the museum. And then our CEO from Lac-Alzap, Andrew Robinson, will provide us some updates on Nisga'a Village supports for local businesses as well. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our first two panelists who will lead off our presentation this afternoon. Mr. Ryan Hales, of course, is a partner and business advisor in MNP's Terrace office. He is a member of the Indigenous Services team, and Ryan delivers a full suite of assurance and accounting solutions, as well as customized advice to First Nations communities, governments, and business groups. And Mindy White is a partner and tax specialist with MNP, based in MNP's Prince George office, serving clients across Central and Northern BC. Mindy specializes in helping clients save taxes through strategic tax planning, corporate reorganizations, succession planning, and estate planning. Mindy's clients include First Nations, high net worth individuals, and privately owned businesses in various industries, including manufacturing and oil and gas. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Ryan and Mindy to lead off our presentation this afternoon.
Thanks, Bobby, and thanks again to NLG for hosting this webinar, and to all the panelists for joining us, and all the attendees who have tuned in to hopefully get some good information. So probably first thing I'll do is just kind of lead in. So I know in past we've talked about programs like the CERB, the CESB that's available for students, and then the Canada Student Support grant that's available for students who volunteer. So excited to do a little bit of a different spin this week and talk about some of the programs that are out there for the various businesses and small businesses that exist. Couple of things that I'll just recap from other webinars. So as we all know, the personal tax filing deadline was was June 1st, but there's no kind of penalties or interest charge as long as you file by September 1. So I would encourage anyone who hasn't done that yet to do that. And that filing can have an impact on a lot of the different programs and benefits that are out there for individuals. And I think we'll find that being up to date with some of your Government of Canada accounts from your business will also have an impact on the different programs. Similarly to the personal programs, there's been an extension on tax filing deadlines, and there's some relief around when you have to file your GST, PST returns if your employer health tax is applicable to you. And then the province has kind of some other programs out there that I think will be a good fit for people as well. A couple of the programs that Mindy's going to talk to you about are specifically the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, CEWS, the Temporary Wage Subsidy, and also the Canada Emergency Business Account, which is a loan program. So with that, maybe I'll get out of the way and I'll let Mindy lead into a bit of an overview of those programs.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here today to speak with everyone about these important measures. I hope you're all staying healthy and safe during this time. I wanted to touch on first the temporary wage subsidy for employers. This was the first one announced. It's 10% of remuneration paid to employees between March 18th and June 19th. So a shorter term measure. There is a maximum per employer of $25,000. There is a maximum amount per employee of $1,375. So it's really it's limited. It's not as impactful as the next subsidy I'll talk about. It's limited to certain employers only. Canadian controlled private corporation, subject to certain criteria, an individual other than a trust, partnership, of which all members are eligible as well, and nonprofits and registered charities. Employers will qualify if they employ one or more individuals in Canada. They have an existing business number and payroll account number with CRA on March 18th, 2020, and if they pay salary, wages, and bonuses to their employees. This one's a little bit limiting because you do need to have that payroll account set up as at March 18th. And again, it's 10%. It will integrate and affect the next subsidy I'm going to talk about, and that's the big one. That's the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. We refer to it as the 75% subsidy. It's for those employers who are individuals, taxable corporations, trusts, partnerships. 50% of the members must be other eligible entities. It's for nonprofit organizations and registered charities. When it was initially announced, it really left out a large segment of employers who Indigenous groups, Indigenous government-owned corporations were initially excluded, along with their partnerships. But luckily, there were changes announced in May that these entities now qualify. So Indigenous government-owned corporations that carry on a business, as well as their partnerships, where their members are Indigenous governments and other eligible employers, will now qualify for this. It's for employees on eligible remuneration paid between March 15th and August, and it may be extended further. It's dependent on a specific formula. It has a limit of $847 per week per employee. And there's certain requirements for our non-arm's length employees and types of revenue when you earn those from related parties. So the calculation itself is quite complex. The application is open. You do have to apply online. They're in calculating revenue and determining whether you're eligible. There is a comparison period that you need to make. So it's it's comparing to the same month or period last year, or January, February 2020, the average of those. As I mentioned, there's an application and it's open now. If you apply and qualify under one period, you immediately are eligible for the next period, but not the period after. So you do have to keep track of the applications and the periods. Now then, the final measure that I wanted to touch on was the Canada Emergency Business Account. That's limited to small businesses and not-for-profits. It is a loan with a grant portion. So interest-free loans up to $40,000, and 25% of the loan may be forgiven if the balance is repaid by December 31st, 2022. They had initially introduced some payroll requirements that your payroll had to be greater than 20 grand or 15. Now it's changed to 20. So if you have lower payroll amounts, you can qualify for this as well. You can apply through the banking institution that you use, the one you use the most often for your business. So you need a business operating account, a business number with CRA, and to have filed your 2018 or 2019 tax return. And for the lower payroll amount, you need to have eligible non-deferrable expenses incurred in the business. As I mentioned, the application is through the financial institution. There is another similar loan available through Aboriginal Capital Corporations. It's structured the same way, where a portion is loan and then there's 25% that is eligible to be forgiven.
Thank you, Mindy. And thank you, Ryan, for that overview of an update on federal and provincial programs and how to access them. Our next panelist is Mr. Bert Mercer, again, who I mentioned was the Economic Development Manager with Niska government. So Bert, you could lead us into sort of the programs, areas that you deliver on behalf of the Niska Nation, and how citizens access them, and sort of how things have come about since COVID, and whether those are all still accessible to our citizens during this unprecedented time. Bert?
Thanks, Bobby. The first program that I administer is called the Niska Business Development Fund. And it's all based on, it's a contribution, and it's a contribution at 40% of total business costs. So if your business was 100,000, you can get a contribution of 40,000, which is in 2 years. If it's still running in 2 years, it's written off as a grant. So it's a huge program. The whole idea behind that 40% is to look at the it's like an equity towards an entrepreneur or a corporation. And it's all done by application. But the problem that we have on that process is that once it goes, if it passes the application process, then it's a second phase where a detailed proposal has to be submitted. And the one thing that we're trying to do now is we're trying to simplify that part so that entrepreneurs that have a good business idea can easily access the funding from us. And then once they access funding for us, then they could use it as their equity towards alternative financing on the other 50%, because anyone that's over 35 and over, they have to have equity in terms of cash or assets of 10%. And if you're 34 and under, you're considered a youth, so you only need a 5% equity. So it's not a bad program to use, because they can approach Tricor, which is one of the AFIs, because Tricor offers what's called the Aboriginal Business Equity Fund, and an entrepreneur or business can access up to 25,000 to go towards their business operation, and and it's a grant. It's non-repayable. And then the tracker also offers that 40,000 program that Mindy was talking about, where 25% is written off as a grant. And all these programs that we talked about, they're also on. I also go on a Zoom call with Indigenous Tourism BC, where they have guest speakers from back east or whoever's delivering those programs, and they talk about the targeted wage subsidy, the extension of the programs that are available to entrepreneurs. But the biggest problem that we found out was that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that aren't structured properly, as what Mindy was talking about. And if you're not structured properly, you can't access those programs because the policies behind it that have been developed, a lot of Indigenous entrepreneurs can't qualify themselves. And that's all over BC. But the other program we're working on right now, it's called the Business Incubator Program. And it's a new program that we're developing along with the Prosperity Steering Committee. But we're gonna provide a grant to each of the 4 villages of 15,000 to use to work with 2 potential entrepreneurs in each village. And then but we're also identifying Niska business champions in the valley and outside, because there are some really successful entrepreneurs that are operating, and some of them have been operating for years. And the other program that could be available to entrepreneurs if they apply to it, and that's the Niska Employment Skills and Training, because they offer that targeted wage subsidy program at the minimum wage. And they can also provide an entrepreneur with training dollars if it's just a certificate program. And they could pay for that the cost to take the training. But since COVID, we funded one project to date. It was a business expansion on New Seafood You Eat It. And the program has been open ever since. But and I have 3 more that I'm recommending to the CFO for approval. And once those are approved, then we do the check rec, and then then we fill out it's a legal document, and I fill it out. It's a contribution agreement, and it's about 10 pages, but it covers everything on the reporting requirements back to the nation after the first year, which includes where the money was spent, but the only part that they have to report on is the 40%. They don't report on 100% of the total cost. So, and we're still creating linkages, like especially with Indigenous Tourism BC and Northern BC Tourism. We're doing that recovery plan. And one of them, Teresa's on a call on Friday, and that's the recovery plan with Tourism Prince Rupert, Tourism Terrace, Tourism Kitimat, and Tourism Smithers. And through the nation, we're investing 2,000 towards that, and so each of the other 4 towns are investing 2,000 each. So Northern Development Initiative Trust is providing a grant of up to 11,500. It's basically to set up a small web link and photos and stuff like that, just to do a recovery plan for 2021 for Northwestern BC. But there's a lot of programs out there. I know some people are just slowly going back to their offices and even up at Nisga'a government, because we have so many employees. We kind of have to maybe 20 people at a time, but I'm waiting for the plexiglass to go up. before I go back there. So, because I have a granddaughter at home. So, but yeah, there's a lot of programs out there, and then and I was aware of the ones that Mindy talked about because it pops up. And last year we applied when the Rural Dividend Fund was open. We applied for $100,000 for that the Niska Business Incubator. And because of COVID, I got a phone call. What's that? Where? I got a phone call on March 29th from the province Ministry of Forest Lands. They approved our application for $100,000 as a grant. So we have that funding. Yeah, the funding is going to go a long ways. It's a good thing about some of these provincial programs that are kind of kicking in because they're moving more and more money. Like yesterday, the Ministry of Finance said there's about 2-point-something billion that they're going to be in deficit. That's because 6-point-something. I think it is 1.2 billion because I think I can't remember. But anyway, that's how they're operating. Like I think all the provinces are like that anyway, right across Canada. That's it, Bobby.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bert. Sounds like you have a little aspiring Nisga'a entrepreneur banging down your door.
I'm getting tired.
Hello to your granddaughter. Now, you mentioned Nisga'a Village is supporting local businesses, so that's a good segue into our next panelist, and that's Andrew. Andrew, if you wanted to provide us some information on the supports you provide for local businesses at a village level, Nisga'a Village government level, that'd be great. And what sort of initiatives do you have going right now?
Okay, cool. Thanks, Bobby. And I do think bringing everything into the context of COVID, as Bert did, kind of provides us with the opportunity to ensure that I think community safety, first off, was paramount for everybody. And I really enjoyed listening to Mindy and Ryan's presentation in regards to the what I call program pliability of the federal government and provincial governments devolving of funds, and then the following Thursday they changed all the parameters because everybody that applied for the programs, if you weren't in debt or had an actual loan with a chartered bank, you did not qualify for any of the programs. And then by Thursday they changed all the parameters around because Indigenous companies were trying to get in the door, and small businesses were trying to get into the door to get some support, but because they didn't have huge debts, they did not qualify for the programs. So I'm really glad to hear and have the individuals that are participating in the panel today note that, because it gives them another opportunity to kind of work with ourselves or work with Bert on accessing those programs with the information that was shared from the representatives from the audit team. I do think that one of the major things that we have been working on across the nation, it did come to a big halt when everybody moved into their home communities, but we did a lot of work on the ground in regards to, has to do with that prosperity steering committee. And there was Bert mentioned that there was about 15 grant that was passed down to each of the communities, and it also is entailed working with a lot of the nation's larger assets and building a more robust restart strategy, and especially to support the museum and to look at the recovery effort we'd have with tourism, especially around Vetter Lodge and other places like that. The Prosperity Steering Committee was kind of tasked with saying, okay, how do we connect the dots between all the communities and all the groups to make sure that once everything is opened up, we can hit the ground running. And also with all those entrepreneurs, Bert mentioned a couple of them with UC Food, and a lot of the carvers and artisans and small stores in our communities could really benefit from accessing some of the wage subsidy programs that were mentioned by Mindy and Brian. But at the same time, the business incubators that Bert was touching on, we have a couple of small businesses in our community that would really benefit from the five. We were looking at two $5,000 programs with the Prosperity Committee resources, but at the same time, if we could look at 3 of the entrepreneurs that were a part of that program. And one of the things we've done as a village is we've really looked at the primary services that are required during a crisis. And we are looking a lot at agriculture and food security based programs or artisan programs that provide for crafts or provide for things for individuals. One of the largest challenges that we've seen in the community was a lack of places to fix your vehicle, because no one was open to fix your car. No one was open to do your oil. No one was open to help you with what you really needed as a source to get around. And so how do our efforts kind of dovetail with those? They dovetail with those by us saying, okay, with this incubation process that was going through our ECDev arm and in each of the communities, can we provide these small scale micro lending programs to those projects to kind of add to the core services? Because again, many of you know how individuals felt when going to Terrace, when we closed the hot springs down, when we closed down our neck of the woods, they were like, well, why are you guys coming out here to do stuff? And again, how do we build those service gaps for ourselves? By supporting those programs. And I think this time away from the office and this time away from the larger pieces that we normally deal with gave us a real opportunity to kind of digest that and say, okay, then how do we support it? So that's been really nice. And again, we're looking at also working with those individuals in our micro lending program that our community has always kind of done with our economic development budget. We've supported stores in purchasing small scale equipment, doing some capital purchases, which has been really helpful. And we also help them in terms of getting in touch with Bert and help them in terms of getting in touch with a lot of the other groups. We've not had much luck with Indigenous Tourism BC because, again, I'd say the largest gap, one of the biggest gaps in our community with our young entrepreneurs are our seamstresses, are our artisans, carvers. They do a great deal of work, and a great deal of their revenue comes from April, May, June, July, right from Awaken season until September. They're relying on that museum traffic. So it's great to make sure that they are fully supported. And I would love to see some opportunities for them because, as stated earlier, they don't have all those T's crossed when it comes down to business because they're a small mom and pop shop doing stuff. And it would be really nice for us to kind of wrap our head around how do we support them. So that'd be about it, Bobby.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Very delighted to introduce our next guest, panelist, who is she just joined us most recently. Her name is Teresa Schobert, sorry. She's the Niska Museum Director and Curator. And she just recently joined NLG as Director and Curator of the Niska Museum. And she specializes in collaborative planning and development of heritage sites into interactive museum and parks facilities, most recently in Florida. So allow me to give you a formal welcome to the Niska Nation, Teresa, and I'll invite you to sort of provide us an overview of the impacts of COVID on the Niska Museum and what the forecast is for the museum going into the summer. And yeah, because we know that the museum, as the gem of the Niska Nation, has attracted thousands of visitors each summer in previous years, and given these unprecedented times, that's changed this summer. So we're eager to hear sort of how that impacts the museum, and of course all of the tourism spin-offs from the museum. So welcome, Teresa.
Thank you, Bobby. And it was a great segue that Andy mentioned about the museum traffic helping to support some of the artisans and crafts people in the community. And we as a museum have also been closed, of course, and have suffered some revenue deficits in the same regard. There's a number of other programs that are available to museum facilities, and so we've been able to capitalize on some grant sources. Through Indigenous Tourism BC, they gave out a little bit of funding, emergency relief, for people to sort of maintain their operations, but also through the BC Arts Council. And we currently have an application we're drafting from Canadian Heritage. It's the Museum Assistance Program, but it's emergency funding. And because of these unprecedented times, they've actually broadened some of their eligibility requirements. And so it might be relevant also to some of the villages, because First Nations groups can apply as long as they manage or conserve collections in their communities. And so there might be more opportunity there, and I'll certainly share that around after this call. But all of this funding is tied to operating costs, but also to the idea that we find new ways to care for the collections, but also to maintain some level of public access. So we've been working on a couple of objectives in that regard, because the museum will not be open until at least phase 3 of the NLG reopening plan. And so currently there's not a date that's been assessed for when that might be. It could be September or later. Of course, the museum typically closes down right after Thanksgiving. So if it's later than September, we really won't have a season this year. And even if we do, our initial reopening includes self-guided tours and a minimum number of people coming into the facility, rather than full-scale operations with the educational programs and the facility rentals that drive or help sustain catering businesses and some of the people who provide programs within the museum. We will not be, it's very unlikely we'll be offering any of those things in the current calendar year, which is too bad. But we all know that this situation is safety is the most important thing. So internally, we've discussed doing 3 different things that are related to helping us maintain a presence, but also might relate to some degree to the conversations that have already been had. We're going to be operating with a much larger online presence. Each year, the museum has done a couple of temporary exhibits, and we just released, each summer we get funding through Young Canada Works to have some seasonal student staff support. And we just put those job applications out there. They were released by NLG last week. And those students will be assisting us to translate what the museum previously has done in terms of exhibits to create some virtual tours and to also create some virtual content that relates to previous temporary exhibits. The other thing that we're looking at doing is adding an online component to the gift store. So the gift store is one of the major components of revenue for the museum, in part because when people visit places, they have an interest in taking home a souvenir. But we I guess in conversation, and this is a lengthy conversation, but prior to my arrival, there's been a strong interest in increasing the amount of local content within the gift store. And then an opportunity might be to then use the online store as a way to provide a front for a lot of local artisans and craftspeople that might not have as large of a platform to be able to extend their works out to people who might be interested. And so we're beginning to explore how we can do that operationally in terms of what we might need to change for our point of sale system and our online space and things like that. But that's something that we're certainly hoping to launch before around the time that around early fall at least. So that's kind of a brief update, unless there's anything more specific that you want me to touch on, Bobby.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Teresa. And thank you to each of our panelists for your very brief and concise and excellent overviews of your respective programs and services. This will bring us into the Q&A portion of our webinar now. So if any of our attendees have any questions or comments for any of the panelists in relation to their presentations, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen where you can submit a written question. And we provided notice of this webinar last week and welcomed written emailed questions, and we've received few. So I'll get into those just to give you an opportunity as attendees to pose any questions you may have. So the first one, one sec. So this is in relation to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. So perhaps this may be for Ryan or Mindy. My business isn't incorporated. Can I still apply for the CEWS if I pay employees?
I'll take that one. Great question. Provided you qualify, you've got a payroll account, you're paying wages out, and you meet revenue thresholds, then yes. As an individual, you're a sole proprietor, you could qualify for this subsidy. It's important that you check your revenue and see if it's decreased 15% in that first period and 30% thereafter for the following periods. So you can still qualify. Thanks.
Oops. Great, thanks, Mindy. So this is another in relation to the emergency wage subsidy. How do I determine if my revenue decreased enough for the emergency wage subsidy? What if I'm not up to date on my bookkeeping?
Okay. I'll touch a little bit more on the revenue threshold, because that's important. Right now, under the criteria, there are 4 claim periods. So the first claim period is March 15th to April 11th. And if you experienced a revenue decline of 15%, you may qualify, and you compare the same period this year with the period last year. So if you notice there's a 15% decrease to last year, same March 15th to April 11th, then you might qualify. But if for whatever reason, maybe you weren't set up last year and you started a new business after that period, you can still compare to the average of January and February 2020. So you compare the March 15th to April 11th to the average of January, February. And then after that April 11th period, it's 30%. So in April 12th to May 9th, May 10th to June 6th, and then June 7th to July 4th. That's the 30%. If you haven't done your bookkeeping, it'll be really hard to be able to support your claim. And CRA will do some verification work. I think it's starting in August that they'll start reviewing some claims and expect you to provide support for your claim. So it's important that when you apply, and you can apply online through My Business Account or through your representative or a web application, you can actually apply. There's a box that you have to tick. You have to attest that to the best of your knowledge, it's accurate and complete. So in order to give yourself comfort over that, it's important that you've done your bookkeeping or at least taken a look to support that. Brian, did you have any comments on that?
No, I think that was excellent, Mindy, and just like all these programs, it's important to make sure you've got kind of all the boxes checked off before you finalize and submit your applications, because many of them do kind of carry some potential penalties or interest if you apply in error, right? So it's important to make sure you get your record keeping up to date before you apply.
Okay, great. Thank you both. So another question that was submitted by email, and this comes from a local entrepreneur. So as an entrepreneur, I cannot find any benefits offered by the provincial and federal governments that I would qualify for because my small business does not have a payroll. I find this is a sector that has fallen through the cracks as we continue to lose revenue but continue to pay taxes and fixed monthly costs. Besides taking out a loan, can my small business without a payroll get any government assistance?
So I can tackle that one. I think unfortunately that's kind of unincorporated sole proprietors are one that can occasionally kind of fall through the different support program cracks, if you will. So there is the Canada Emergency Business Account that Mindy mentioned. So if you have some kind of eligible non-deferrable expenses, you can qualify for that $40,000 loan, and then the 20% or sorry, the 25% forgiveness there, so 10,000 forgiveness. But that said, that is still a loan, and the 30,000 portion of that would be repayable. But what that can look like is if you have ongoing payments of rent, of property taxes, of lending interest, kind of other utility fixed costs that are getting incurred every month, you may still qualify for that program based on the criteria Mindy outlined earlier. One other program that maybe isn't applicable to a large portion of our viewers here, but there is a rental support program. And what that program supports is if you've had you've had to shut down your business. So I think an easy example might be a restaurant that's had to close down. Now, if you're paying commercial rents on that space that your business operates in, there is a program where you can request relief from your landlord, who can then receive a forgivable loan if they give you an appropriate reduction in rent. So that's a program that's certainly worth exploring further if that's applicable. The other option that is out there for sole proprietors is the Canada Emergency Response Benefit that we've talked about for individuals, so the CERB. And so I think that's kind of probably a final stop for those people, is if you're unable to work and earn your sole proprietor, your self-employment income, that's probably the last place you're going to want to go is the CERB, and then you can get that $2,000 a month, right?
Okay, great, thank you. So once again, if any of our attendees have any questions, just click on the Q&A box and enter your question, your written question. Andrew, you have something?
One of the things that Teresa has brought up, and one of the things that we've really recognized, is a lot of the artisans, we've had a few that have put up poles and put up bowls and hats, and we buy a lot of stuff off of individual artisans, including like moccasins, all kinds of stuff. And a lot of them had been selling the items online over the COVID, because a lot of people that were doing enjoying their time working from home and were still collecting the income had a lot of disposable income during COVID, because they were not going out to live their regular lives. So they were shopping a lot. And so we see a lot of individuals that we were contacted by Northern Savings Credit Union to inform those individuals to remove their e-transfer accounts from their personal accounts and create better business accounts to have the e-transfers going into those accounts, because they were finding that their accounts were being frozen because they were receiving so much money in e-transfers and so much transactions in e-transfers. Even as a sole proprietorship, they should have something else set up for that. And I just think that kind of goes hand in hand with what Mindy and Ryan were discussing earlier about getting your books in order, and some of the stuff that Teresa has discussed too, because maybe there's a solution out of this call where we can offer our artisans an opportunity to have that platform that Teresa has, but at the same time providing that kind of shelter that they need from the new financial laws, especially in regards to e-transfers.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So getting into our submitted questions by email. And this is in relation to taxes. So have there been changes to deadlines for corporate taxes? What about GST and PST returns, or employer health tax? Perhaps that's for you, Mindy.
Me or Ryan. I can comment on the corporation tax deadline. There was a change, And it applies to those corporations that had a filing deadline after March 18th. Those have been deferred or extended to September 1st, 2020. And that includes payments for the 2019 year, so balances and installments due. So those have been extended September 1st, 2020. So if you had a corporate tax return due before May 31st or June, July, or August 2020. And Ryan, did you want to comment on the other ones?
Absolutely, yeah. I can talk about those. So, the employer health tax, there has been a deferral there, and I'm just going to take a look at what the actual deadline is, but I believe it is the end of September. Yeah, so September 30th. Is the extended deadline for the employer health tax. So there's some relief there if you're one of those businesses with wages of the threshold that require you to make that payment. And then similar for PST, there's been a deferral till the end of September as well. So a little bit of relief coming, I think, on the tax front for those that have payments there, which is welcome. But the other thing to always remember is you are still going to have to make those payments by that deadline. So they're not disappearing. They're just being pushed down the road a little bit when hopefully everybody's in a little bit better cash position.
Okay, great, thank you. So now a question in relation to the CEBA, the Canada Emergency Business Account. How do I apply for the CEBA, and what are eligible expenses?
Excellent. Well, I can probably tackle that one as well. So the CEBA application you can do through your financial institution. So if you just kind of log into your online banking, there's generally a link there that will take you through to the application process. Now, kind of eligible expenses, the easiest eligible expense would be wages. So if you meet that 20,000 to 1.5 million in wage threshold. The other items that are kind of eligible expenses are things that they would be considered non-deferrable expenses. So fixed costs that are ongoing, right? So maybe that's interest on existing loan payments, whether it's property taxes, paying utility bills, rental, things of those natures that you can't put off to maintain your business space and keep your business ready to get back to normal operations.
Okay, great, thank you. So once again, if you have, as attendees, if you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to click the Q&A box, and we'll ensure that your question gets answered by one of the panelists this afternoon. So here's another one in relation to the wage subsidy. How does the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy differ from the temporary wage subsidy, and can both be claimed?
Yeah, I can answer that. So in addition to what I mentioned before, the TWS being 10% of remuneration paid up to $13.75 per employee and $25,000 max per employer, the CEWS, the 75% wage subsidy, has no maximum other than those weekly maximums per employee. So it results in a significant benefit compared to the TWS. As well, under the CEWS, you need a payroll count as of March 15th compared to the TWS, which is March 18th. And the interaction is that the TWS you don't need to apply for. You just apply it to your payroll remittances and reduce them accordingly. The CEWS has an application, and when you fill out that application, it will say how much of, it'll ask for how much of the TWS you've claimed for that period. And the 75% wage subsidy is actually reduced by the TWS 10% that you claimed. If you ended up not claiming any of the temporary wage subsidy, or you didn't qualify for it, then you're entitled to the full 75%. So, you know, there's been instances, because there were so many changes that came out after time, some people had applied for the 10% and then applied for the full 75% of the other wage subsidy. There's now the ability to amend prior CEWS applications, so you can go back and fix them. You're supposed to submit any overpayments back to CRA, and then it should be cleaned by the time the period catches up. So any 10% that you claim will reduce the 75% wage subsidy. That's probably the most important thing to keep in mind. And then, actually, I should say the TWS doesn't have the revenue requirements for the declines that the 75% does. Ryan, anything that you'd like to add on those two?
No, I think that covers off kind of the differences in how they interact with each other, which is important.
Perfect. Thank you both. So we have, we're just about coming up on 1 hour now. So we'll begin wrapping up. If there's, again, one last chance, if there's any questions for any of our panelists with respect to their presentations this afternoon, please feel free to just provide your written question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And while you're contemplating that, I will now get us into some closing commentary by our panelists. So we'll lead off with Ryan and Mindy once again. So if you want to provide any closing comments or additional information.
Thanks, Bobby. Yeah, I think the theme of this is there's a lot of different programs out there, whether they're programs that NLG is putting on or they're offered by the federal or provincial governments or various different funding agencies. So if you're uncertain if there's a program that applies to your specific case, I think it never hurts to reach out you know, to a representative at NLG or one of your village government representatives, or to your professional services provider, just to ask about those. The Government of Canada has some great resources on what programs are out there, so I'd encourage you to check that site and also check the NLG website for the content that we're working on together that's being posted up there. And then I think one additional comment I'd just like to make on particularly the wage subsidy programs is to remember that the payments under those will have to be included in income for next year, right? So similar to discussions we would have had on the personal side about the CERB, where it's a taxable payment to you. It's the same thing for businesses. So certainly still well worth applying for the programs if they apply for you, but something you want to keep in mind when it comes time for next year, that those payments will add to your income of your business. And just, yeah, thanks again to all the panelists and participants, and hope everybody enjoys this beautiful July weather we're having right now.
Right. In addition to these unprecedented times with COVID, it's also weather unprecedented. I think if we had our summer in May. A few questions have rolled in, so just before we go to Mindy with her closing comments, this may be for either you or Ryan. Any experience with lenders being reluctant to offer loans under CEBA?
That's a really good question. I don't know, Mindy, if you've had some experiences, definitely chime in. But I haven't heard of anything there. But I think it probably brings up a valid consideration, is that if you're considering applying for one of those, for the CEBA or one of the lending programs, I think it's really important to do maybe some cash flow planning and really look at what is the impact of that lending going to be to your business. If it's that you need it to get through a short time and you know you're going to be able to repay it, that's excellent. If your business was maybe having a tough time before or struggling a little bit, sometimes lending and additional borrowing isn't always the right answer. So I think that's probably a good opportunity to seek some additional kind of guidance and really work on some cash flow planning to make sure that lending makes sense for you. Mindy, I don't know if you've heard of actual institutions that have had any concerns with lending under that program.
Not so much. There were some issues in the beginning with institutions providing the loans and when they would get the cash, and for the Aboriginal capital corporations when they would have their applications open. And I think most of the bugs have been worked out now with the extension of the criteria. Really came down to having an open payroll account or a business operating account with the institution. And then knowing that you can only apply for one loan. So if you have multiple financial institutions that you work with, you would go to your main one.
Okay, great, thank you. Oh, Bert, you're just back just in time as I lend you the floor for your closing comments, but also we just received another question in relation to the Business Development Fund that you administer. Yep. So the question is, am I eligible as a Niska citizen for the Niska Business Development Fund when I am 50% proprietor in partnership with a non-Nisga'a partner?
Yeah, I can quickly answer that. We've done one business in the valley, Nass Valley Wild Medicine. When they applied, it showed that the Niska was 51% and the non-Niska was 49% when they did their application, but legally they were 50-50. So we just took their application that way, and then we funded them. So that they are eligible if they have a partnership. But I was going to mention there when about a month ago when I did the Tourism BC Board of Director meeting, and one of the Board of Directors, her name is Lori Simcox, and she's actually from the Yukon. Sorry about that. But what the Yukon government did once COVID kicked in, because they closed their borders, they because Yukon only has about population of probably about 25,000 people, and Whitehorse is their main town. The Yukon government is paying each business $30,000 a month. Each business, and she said, no kidding, she said that's what they're doing. So when I talk about that, and especially with the impacts in some of our own Niska businesses, and through our Niska Business Development Fund, I think it would be a great opportunity for the Niska Nation, through the Niska Listeners government, to maybe pay some monetary fee out to businesses that are impacted through our Niska Business Development Fund. And it could be just a simple application because of COVID. But Darren's on here, that's the reason I mentioned it. So anyway, I enjoyed the conversation, but I'm glad that we have these webinars through Zoom. It kind of keeps us up to date on what everybody's up to and doing. And yeah, it's good to meet you, Teresa. Yeah, we're moving forward on our Business Incubator project and our tourism implementation plan. We have 2 signed off contracts, and a lot of it's falling underneath our Niska Prosperity Steering Committee, which is comprised of the 4 Niska villages. We have our terms of reference with them, and so everything looks pretty good. And because I have a new team with things are moving at a faster pace, and I get my approvals right away. So it's great. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Bert. Now, Andrew, do you have closing comments?
Thank you very much, Bobby. I really appreciated also listening to Ryan and Mindy, and some of the expert advice, especially in regards to taxation, and again, kind of echo Bert's sentiments in regards to how some of the other Indigenous groups and including the smaller territories really started to support their sole proprietorships and the little mom and pops or the grandfathers that were selling stuff to their tourists on the way by. I remember normally by this time of the year, we're sitting at about 2,000 people that come through our community to go to the museum. Normally it starts at Fishery Bay time. We lost all of that this year. The lava beds has lost all of that. Getting sick, all of us have lost all of that. It's crucial to a lot of people, and it makes their Christmas lives, it makes the rest of their year till that following tourism season really beneficial. So how can we provide better access to them, but also how can we kind of flex around our programs and work with Nisga'a government in regards to doing that is a real good opportunity for us to have individuals contact our economic development officers in each of the villages to kind of have that candid conversation with them to say, what programs are they eligible for, or have they applied to any programs, or do they just feel scared of it? Like there's so many people that are afraid to apply for CERB because they just don't want to get nailed by the tax man when the tax man comes knocking. So I'm really grateful for today and thankful for all of your presentation, because it'll help the individuals that are on the phone to spread the word to some of the small businesses and get a lot more of them out to maybe look at utilizing the incubation process that Bert spoke about, because that is available in each of the 4 Nisga'a villages. And I also know that our urban locals are also working close with their local businesses in terms of assisting them. So thank you very much, Bobby.
So again, any information in relation to the Niska Nation's response to COVID and information in relation to the development of information we've worked with MNP on, you can go to our website at www.niskanation.ca and you'll find all of it here. And it's being updated as new information is provided. So that's just for your information. I would now like to welcome Teresa, if you want to provide some closing commentary.
Thank you, Bobby, and thank you for the really nice introduction earlier. It was wonderful to listen to all the panelists as well. I moved to the community in the midst of COVID. In fact, I drove across from Florida to British Columbia while the lockdown was in place. And so it's been quite an interesting time, but a difficult one to come in and understand how everything's interconnected. And this was really useful in that regard. If I said anything that anyone from the community that's online knows of anyone who the museum could be a good platform for what you do, please do get in touch with us so that we can incorporate that as we develop our online platforms. And Bert and Andy in particular, I'll look forward to working with you directly on some of the things that we can do together to help enhance local businesses in the times that we're in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Teresa. And thank you to each of you, Ryan, Mindy, Andrew, Bert, and Teresa, for your excellent presentation this evening. And a special thank you to each of our attendees that observed and entertained questions this afternoon. As usual, these webinars are recorded and are made available on the Niska Nation website. So if you have any family, friends, or colleagues that would benefit from this information, please refer them to our website and to view either our written or these recorded sessions, because ultimately this is us wanting to get information to our citizens on whether or not they're eligible for these programs and services during these unprecedented times. So once again, thank you to everyone for your time this afternoon, and I wish you and your families health and safety, and continue to take care and enjoy this rainy July day. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
You too. Hawa.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.